because it's so brazen. It is just, Mike, when I see this woman walking out of the restaurant, like every one of us does, we walk out of a business, we go to our car, we are not thinking that someone is going to pull a gun on us, right?
You know, Anna, this is exactly one of the issues that I am so worried about all the time. I think with the way we've become so addicted to our mobile devices that we end up looking at them constantly. We see this happening in this video where she's focused on her mobile device. She does take a look inside the vehicle as she's unlocking it, if you caught that part of this. So she has some awareness.
Well, imagine a scene straight out of a crime thriller. A successful businesswoman. Her name, Jessica Torres. She's brutally gunned down in broad daylight outside of her favorite burger spot in San Bernardino, California. The shocking twist? Authorities allege it was meticulously planned and it was a murder for hire scheme orchestrated by her estranged husband, Sergio Reveles, amid a bitter divorce battle over their multi-million-dollar empire. Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, your go-to true crime channel where we dive deeply into the criminal investigative process and hopefully provide a little education along the way. So if you're passionate about unraveling mysteries and understanding the psychology of crime, you've come to the right place. But please, before we jump in, take a moment, hit the like and subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the bell. Make sure you got notifications turned on and share us with your friends. And if you wouldn't mind, give us a thumbs up. It helps us to continue to bring good content. Now, Jessica and Sergio seem to have it all. A thriving pallet business, multiple properties across Southern California, and a reputation as a community-minded entrepreneurial couple. But behind the scenes, their marriage was falling apart. And for over 2 years, the couple was entangled in a contentious divorce, with neither party willing to part with their substantial assets. Well, on January 10th of 2025, the simmering tensions reached a horrifying climax. Surveillance footage revealed that Jessica was walking out of the Burger Point restaurant with coffee in hand when a Ford Escape pulled into the parking lot. A man, identified by police as Geraldo Torres, and maybe Gerardo, I don't know for sure, he exited the SUV and he approached Jessica in her Mercedes G-Wagon. What happened next was chilling, because after a brief struggle, Torres grabbed Jessica's purse, and as she attempts to flee, he opens fire on her. And actually, when you watch the video, you're going to see her inside of the vehicle, behind the steering wheel, and he tries to shoot her inside that vehicle. Well, they have a little bit of a battle outside of the vehicle, and then he ends up fatally wounding her just steps from the restaurant's entrance where she tried to flee. Now, at first glance, the brazen nature of the attack, occurring in a busy area during lunchtime, might seem reckless. However, investigators believe that this was a carefully orchestrated hit. and authorities have uncovered evidence that suggests that the conspirators stalked Jessica for months, meticulously tracking her routines to pinpoint the perfect moment to strike. And I'm still scratching my head a little why in the middle of the day, in front of a busy burger joint, was the perfect moment to strike. But nonetheless, the involvement of multiple individuals further underscored the organized nature of this crime, because alongside Lamas Torres, police arrested allegedly the getaway driver, a guy named Arnaldo Rules, and his brother Reynaldo Royes. So Arnaldo and Reynaldo are suspected as acting as middlemen. And then a guy named Juan Perez, a business associate of Sergio, the husband. The intricate web of connections points to a plot that was both elaborate and premeditated. Despite careful planning, certain aspects of the murder raise perplexing questions. Why did they choose to execute the plan in broad daylight, in a location that was teeming with potential witnesses? In fact, one witness sitting right next to the victim. Such a high-risk situation seems counterintuitive for a hired hit, where discretion is typically paramount. And I want you to kind of keep that in mind. Because moreover, the attack's execution displayed elements of disorganization, in my opinion. The confrontation escalated into a chaotic struggle with bystanders, again, this guy that was standing right next to her, attempting to intervene. One runs out of the restaurant and then turns back around. This lack of control not only increased the risk of the assailant being apprehended, but it also deviated from what I believe would have been a calculated precision move, especially one that you might expect from a professional hit. Now, reports indicate that the gunman used a firearm that was equipped with a suppressor, something known as a silencer. This choice suggests the initial intent to minimize noise and avoid immediate attention. However, the very public setting and the ensuing commotion rendered the suppressor's advantage moot. It was worthless, and it further highlighted the disjointed execution of this plan. Now, in the wake of the murder, law enforcement quickly connected the dots, and within days, all 5 suspects were in custody, each facing charges of first-degree murder, robbery, and additional special circumstances that could make them eligible for the death penalty. Now, as the legal proceedings unfold, the community remains in shock, grappling with the devastating loss of a beloved woman figure and the disturbing revelation of the plot that reads like fiction, but this thing is just all too real. So let's break down the crime and call out some interesting behaviors, beginning with the elements that support the idea that this was a premeditated act. Now, premeditation is a prerequisite to the death penalty in California, although it's my understanding that there's currently a stay on all death penalty cases in the state, so that may not happen anyway. But here are a couple of signs of premeditation. Number one is the long-term planning and surveillance that apparently went on. Law enforcement has uncovered evidence that suggests that Jessica had been under surveillance for months leading up to the murder. Now, the suspects reportedly tracked her movements, studying her routines, and used all of that to determine the most opportune moment for the attack. Frankly, if they think that was the most opportune moment, I think they probably just got tired of waiting for the right moment and finally acted out. Now, this level of preparation suggests a deliberate strategy to ensure the maximum potential for success in carrying out a crime like this. Number two is the use of intermediaries, or these hired killers. Rather than committing the act himself, the husband allegedly enlists multiple individuals to execute the murder, a classic hallmark of a premeditated hit. Now, the involvement of the middlemen, including Perez, this business associate, and Reveles, the intermediary, suggests an attempt to distance himself from the crimes. And the shooter, Gerardo, He was not randomly chosen, but was instead allegedly recruited for this specific job, and further supporting this idea that the murder was for hire. Now, the choice of weapon and the modifications on the weapon are also kind of interesting, because the gun used in the attack was reportedly equipped with this suppressor, commonly used to muffle the sound of the gunfire, a silencer for you TV buffs. This choice suggests forethought to reduce noise and avoid drawing immediate attention, indicating that the killers were attempting to control the environment and the potential witness reactions. And then another really important thing to talk about is this coordinated execution and roles that each suspect had, because they each had distinct roles in the crime. There was the shooter, the getaway driver, the middleman, and the mastermind. So this coordination among the suspects points to a deliberate division of labor, very characteristic of pre-planned operations. But now let's kind of flip the table a little bit and talk about some of the signs of disorganization. Because while the plot appears meticulously planned, the execution itself raised questions about whether this was an organized or a disorganized crime. And it's not uncommon for organized crimes to quickly become disorganized when things don't go as planned. And the first glaring thing to me is this broad daylight execution in a public place. The crime was committed outside of a busy restaurant during lunch hours, surrounded by potential witnesses and surveillance cameras. A professional hit typically prioritizes discretion, and carrying out an attack in such an exposed setting just increases the chance of identification and capture. Now, struggle and an uncontrolled chaos at the scene were also something I found interesting, because unlike a swift, clean execution by a hitman, the murder escalated into a chaotic struggle. Bystanders attempted to intervene, a variable that a well-planned hit would typically account for. And this lack of control suggests either a breakdown in planning or an underestimation of the environment that they were in. And then, of course, there's the failure to escape unnoticed, because despite their attempts to flee, law enforcement was able to quickly track them down and arrest all 5 suspects. So the speed of their apprehension suggests that elements of their plan either unraveled in execution or were poorly conceived and poorly performed. So January 10, 2025 stands as a chilling example of how even the most meticulously planned crimes can spiral into chaos due to unforeseen variables. What began as a calculated murder for hire plot quickly unraveled, leaving behind a public execution filled with errors, filled with evidence, and with witnesses. So despite extensive planning, the execution faltered under the weight of unexpected resistance from the victim, the intervention of bystanders, and the overwhelming exposure of committing the crime in broad daylight. The organized nature of this crime, this idea of tracking Jessica's movements, hiring multiple intermediaries, and using modified weapons, was simply overshadowed by the disorganized reality of a chaotic struggle, a woman who fought back, excessive risk, and immediate capture of everybody involved.
That the efforts of our team, of our investigators, bring some small measure of closure to the family and all those impacted by this. This homicide took place on January 10th, 2025 at the Burger Point restaurant at 444 West Mill Street. This brazen attack happened in broad daylight, in full view of patrons and employees who were working at the restaurant. Our investigators immediately assumed the case and worked tirelessly and quickly developed leads that ultimately identified and led to the apprehension of the suspects who orchestrated this murder. I want to publicly commend the team for their outstanding work in this case. However, I want to make it known that this is not an anomaly. Our homicide team has an 80% clearance rate, which is far significantly higher than the national average, meaning that if you commit a murder in the city of San Bernardino, there's an 80% chance that you will be hunted down and you will be brought to justice. It's also critically important to inform our community that this was an isolated incident. I understand full well that when incidents like this occur, it brings a lot of fear and concern for personal safety. But there was never a general threat to the community, as we learned very quickly that these criminals targeted this victim in a murder-for-hire scheme that was stemming from a contentious divorce from one of the suspects, Sergio Reveles. Now I'm going to invite Detective Dominic Martinez up to discuss some more details of the case.
Good morning, everyone. Again, thank you guys for being here. We're going to start off by playing the initial video that we had to start our investigation off. As my chief said, it was at the Burger Point here in San Bernardino in the 400 block of West Mill Street. So you'll see up in the left corner there, the television is the suspect vehicle. This is our victim walking out to her vehicle, the Mercedes SUV. That's our suspect vehicle coming up. The front passenger is going to exit the vehicle, later identified as Geraldo Llamas. During this time, there's some sort of conversation going on. He's asking for her purse, gets a hold of her purse. You see he does have a firearm in his hand. He does make an attempt to shoot at her. The victim was able to fight back. There's still a struggle over the firearm. You'll see some citizens did attempt to help her out, but who were also shot at. There was a total of 9 rounds shot at the victim, with one expanded casing, which was from the gun jamming when the victim was fighting back. And chasing around the vehicle, firing multiple times at her. At this point, the victim does make an attempt to run inside the business for safety. Unfortunately, she was struck, slowed her down, and the suspect again shot her an additional time with a fatal wound. When officers arrived on scene, they located her in the doorway. A citizen who was able to provide us a license plate and description of the vehicle that the suspects had fled in. And then we were also given this video surveillance immediately, which assisted greatly in the investigation. Later on during the investigation, we located this SUV, being the suspect SUV, abandoned on the east side of town in the Walmart parking lot. Surveillance in the local area was checked. The suspects had then got into a second vehicle, which was located at another business. There we saw that the suspects had changed their clothing and went inside a business for a short amount of time, got in the second vehicle, and fled the area. Within approximately 4 hours, we had both suspects identified. The shooter, Geraldo Llamas, the driver, Arnold Ruelas, were ID'd as our suspects. The very next morning, we had our surveillance team with the Inland Regional Apprehension Team, part of the FBI, conduct surveillance on Llamas in Bakersfield, California, and then also conduct surveillance on Mr. Arnoldo Ruelas in Los Angeles, California. We recovered the initial vehicle that they had fled in, the SUV. In that vehicle, there was evidence leading us to additional suspects and evidence with the case. So approximately a week later, Thursday, I believe the 16th of January, we obtained arrest warrants for Llamas and Ruelas. Teams with the Bakersfield and FBI teams served warrants at the Bakersfield residence, and then teams with our undercover local agencies served warrants at Ruelas' residence. So there was always one thing that we had always asked ourselves, like, what's the link between the victim and our two suspects? Just always something that was in the back of our minds. So looking at further evidence that was recovered during the initial search warrant of the vehicle and following up on leads on these gentlemen, we determined that the third suspect, Reynaldo Ruelas, was the brother of Arnoldo Ruelas. I was able to then determine that Mr. Reynaldo had worked for a Juan Perez at a local pallet company in the city of San Bernardino. The pallet company that he ran was owned by our victim, Ms. Torres, and her husband, Sergio Reveles. So there's the link that we found between all of our subjects. A search warrant then was authorized for Reynaldo's residence, and a large amount of U.S. currency was located in his house, along with a large amount of U.S. currency at Mr. Arnaldo's residence. Additionally, the suspect, Llamas, currency was located at his residence and on his person. Also, the clothing and additional evidence related to the investigation was located at each suspect's residence. So we did end up talking to each of the individuals, and then we ended up getting a lead to Mr. Perez and then Mr. Reveles. From there, we served a 7-location search warrant on businesses and residents related to all the individuals involved. There we were assisted by the FBI, CHP, Riverside Sheriff's, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. During those search warrants, there was evidence related to the crime recovered, to include large amounts of money, over $200,000 in cash, and numerous firearms. These subjects were later arrested and booked for the murder of Yesenia Torres. So all subjects, all 5 suspects, are currently in custody for her murder.
As a result of the investigation that the chief and detective have talked about, when this case was turned over to our office, the initial arrest of the first 3 defendants was on January the 16th. We filed the case on the 21st of January as to the first 3, the shooter and the 2 getaway drivers. And when we filed that case, we filed special circumstances related to those 3 individuals. That's currently where it stands. As a result of the continued investigation that San Bernardino Police Department engaged in and the other agencies, the 2 additional suspects were arrested on February the 13th. We also filed murder charges against the business partner, Mr. Perez, and the husband, and also alleged 3 special circumstances that relates to all 5 defendants. And so currently what they're each looking at is a count of murder with all the special circumstances that would include lying in wait, financial gain, and the crime committed in the commission of a robbery. And that's currently how we'll proceed. I want to be very, very clear that any time the DA's office talks about these matters, there's only so much that we can go into just to give you the logistics of what we filed, when we filed it, why we filed it. Each of these individuals are innocent until proven guilty. That's the protections that they have in this country, and we're glad for that. The next hearing, as it relates to all 5 of the defendants, will be on March the 14th. We were fortunate that we were able to link up all 5, even though the arrest and the charges happened at separate times. We will proceed on this matter as is currently alleged with the potential of special circumstances as a result of some of the facts that you've heard here, and obviously the tragedy and travesty of having an individual that was essentially assassinated at one of her favorite eateries in San Bernardino. Is a very, very sad case. So I commend the department here, specifically Chief Goodman, his team, everybody who worked on this case. It was an unbelievably tireless effort because you could sense all along that there had to be more to the story. We believe that we've actually encapsulated the entire story, but their diligent work to go from January 10th until February the 13th to be able to get 5 defendants in one case with the evidence that they presented to us that is the result of the charges. I commend their agency and everybody else who was involved in it, and particularly witnesses who came forward very early on and were willing to give statements and try to make identifications, and ultimately that led to the arrest of all 5 of those. So just appreciate your time this morning and allow us to explain who we charge and why we charge it and the theories going forward.
Like I said, unfortunately, there's not much information when it comes to the amount of money that we can release. There is an overwhelming amount of evidence for this case to say that it is a murder for a hire case. As you saw, there was money located at the residence of each of our suspects, along with firearms located, which is all related to this case. But unfortunately, at this time, we can't give the facts as to when, where, and how much money was released. It's been a process for over 2 years. And as you know, when there are multiple millions of dollars involved, there is going to be some going back and forth over assets. I can't say specifically for this case which assets, if any, they were going to fight over or arguing over. But we know that, as we said earlier, that it was definitely a murder for hire case. There is evidence to show that the suspects did stalk our victim for several days and months prior to this murder. On the day of the murder, they were stalking her for several hours. They actually met at a local place, which being Mr. Llamas and Ruales. They met in 2 separate vehicles, one being our vehicle that you guys saw in the video surveillance, and then the other being the getaway vehicle. They met in an area of the city and went to the victim's residence and watched her for several hours, following her to her business and then following her to the eatery where the murder occurred. Suspect vehicle was the gray, it was a Ford Escape. And then our victim's vehicle was the Mercedes SUV. There was, as you know, there's surveillance cameras everywhere. In this case, it was fortunate that we were able to find a lot of good surveillance all the way from the victim's residence to her place of employment, to where the incident occurred, to where they dropped off vehicles and changed vehicles, and we were able to match up all the clothing they were wearing throughout the incident there when they fled.
The case, it's a stark reminder that even the most well-planned crimes can unravel in minutes. When criminals underestimate the unpredictability of human behavior, public intervention, and law enforcement's ability to connect the dots, their meticulous strategies will collapse around them. Well, as the legal proceedings move forward, the community will await justice for Jessica Torres, the successful entrepreneur whose life was cut short by greed, cut short by vengeance, and cut short by a ruthless desire for control. The case serves as a crucial study in forensic psychology and criminal profiling, offering insight into this delicate balance between organizational and disorganized high-profile homicide cases. So folks, I hope you'll take time to comment down below and weigh in on this case. Do you think this was a well-organized hit that went wrong? Or do you believe it was always doomed to fail due to poor execution and poor planning? Let's discuss this down in the comments below. And please make sure you tune in to True Crime with Ana Garcia, where I appear with her to talk about this case in particular. And thanks for tuning in to Profiling Evil. I really appreciate having you along for this journey. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, folks, and turn on notifications so you're not missing any of our future videos. And make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you enjoy audio podcasts, check out Profiling Evil Podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. You can also get some exclusive content at profilingevil.com, where you can check out our missing persons map, our unsolved homicides map, and you can sign up for our digital newsletter. The BOLO stands for Be on the Lookout. And while you're there, check out my true crime books, Deceived or She Knew No Fear. And if you buy them and you're in the United States, I'll ship them to you for free, and I'll sign them if you buy it through profilingevil.com. Anywhere else in the world, or for those of you who don't want the signature, you can get it at Amazon. Hey, thanks for your support of Profiling Evil. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.